of the upper middle class professional women are unhappy, miserable. They want, and they don't know why they're unhappy. They want to blame it on men, okay? The men must change. Men must become more like women. No, that is the wrong way to go, okay? It's when men are men, okay, and understand themselves as men, are secure as men, then you're going to be happier.
Hi, what's going on everybody? Welcome back to Philosophy Insights. Camille Paglia has been one of the most critical voices in criticizing modern feminism since the 1990s. Today, we explore why she criticizes the very movement she identifies with and what makes her dissent so significant. Paglia sees three main failures of modern feminism. First, its aversion towards men and masculine traits. Second, its victim mentality. And third, its aversion to acknowledging innate gender differences. Let us start with the aversion towards masculine traits. Paglia argues that contemporary feminism has both mischaracterized masculine traits and actively sought to demonize them. This concerns especially competitiveness, aggression, and assertiveness. Paglia points out that competitiveness drives individuals to excel beyond their current capabilities, fostering innovation as people strive to outdo each other and themselves, ultimately pushing societal advancements forward. Similarly, aggression, when channeled constructively, can result in the tenacity necessary for overcoming significant challenges and driving critical changes, while assertiveness is essential for effective leadership, enabling individuals to communicate their vision clearly and mobilize others toward common goals. Combined, these masculine traits have historically played crucial roles in leadership, innovation, and problem-solving, creating strong and vibrant societies. By portraying them as toxic or inherently oppressive, feminism impoverishes society and will ultimately lead to its decline. Paglia is particularly critical of how the educational system and media have responded to feminist critiques of masculinity. She argues that schools increasingly stigmatize normal boyish behavior, leading to disengagement and a lack of motivation among male students. We can see now that males start falling behind their female counterparts already starting in primary school. In the media, the push to redefine masculinity is really an embracement of emasculation, and this can only have detrimental effects on society and the personal identity of men.
All four of my grandparents and my mother were born in Italy. So I remember from my earliest years in this factory town in upstate New York where my relatives came to work in the shoe factory. I can remember still, okay, the life of the Agrarian Era, okay, which was for most of human history, okay, the Agrarian Era, where there was the world of men and the world of women. And the sexes had very little to do with each other. Each had power and status in its own realm. Right? And they laughed at each other in essence. Okay? Yeah. The women had enormous power. In fact, the old women ruled, not the young, beautiful women like today. Okay? But the older you were, the more you had control over everyone, including the mating and marriage. There were no doctors, so you had the old women were like midwives and knew all the ins and outs of this inherited knowledge about pregnancy and all these other things. Right? I can remember this and the joy that women had with each other all day long, okay, cooking with each other, companions to each other, talking, conversing. My mother remembered as a small child in Italy when it was time to do the laundry. They would take the laundry up the hill to the fountain, Il Sorgo, okay, and do it by hand. They would sing, they would picnic, and so on. All right, and we get a glimpse of that in the Odyssey when Odysseus is thrown up naked on the shores of Phaeacia. All right, and he hears the sound of women, young women laughing and singing, and it's Nausicaa, the princess, bringing the women to do the laundry. Okay, it's exactly the same thing, right? So there was each gender had its own hierarchy, its own values, its own way of talking, and the sexes rarely intersected. Like I can remember in childhood, on a holiday, typical, it could be a Christmas, it could be a Thanksgiving, whatever, the women would be cooking all day long, everyone would sit down to eat, okay, and then after that, okay, the women would retire en masse to the kitchen, and the men would go, I would look through the window and see all the men would be all outside, usually gather around the car, okay, at a time when cars didn't work as well as they do today, with the hood up, okay, and the men would be standing with their hands on their hips like that, everyone's staring at the engine, okay, and I went, that's how I learned, okay, men were refreshing themselves by studying something technical and mechanical after being with the women, okay, during the dinner, okay, and so on. So all of these problems of today are the direct consequence of women's emancipation and freedom from housework, thanks to capitalism, okay, which made it possible for women to have jobs outside the home for the very first time in the 19th century, no longer to be dependent on husband or father or brother, right? And so this great thing that's happened to us, that allowing us to be totally self-supporting, independent agents, has produced all this animosity between men and women, because the women feel unhappy. Women today, wherever I go, whether it's Italy or Brazil or England or America, okay, or Toronto, okay, the upper middle class professional women are unhappy, miserable. And they don't know why they're unhappy. They want to blame it on men, okay? The men must change. Men must become more like women. No, that is the wrong way to go, okay? It's when men are men, okay, and understand themselves as men, are secure as men, then you're going to be happier.
Next is Paglia's criticism of feminists' victim mentality mindset. According to Paglia, the modern feminist narrative has become overly preoccupied with the idea that women are victims of the patriarchy. This focus diverts attention from the achievements of women, instead fixating on grievances and conflicts. Paglia suggests that this victim mentality encourages a sense of helplessness and passivity. Indeed, psychologically, people who adopt a victim mentality often see themselves as perpetually at the mercy of external forces, perpetually sidelined, wronged, or oppressed by others with detrimental effect. Paglia's critique extends to how feminist victim culture has been institutionalized. There's an industry built around maintaining women's status as victims through various advocacy groups and academic programs, which persistently emphasize gender-based disadvantages. She believes that this approach discourages women from pursuing success through their own efforts and abilities. Ironically, it disempowers women, letting them focus on a social oppression game instead of skill and merit. It also promotes a divisive us versus them mentality between genders.
By the time second wave feminism revived, okay, which was with Betty Friedan's co-founding of NOW in 1967, I was out of sync with them. Okay, so when suddenly they revived and began complaining about men and all that stuff and so on and so forth, and I hated it. Okay, and I was it was early clashes that I had with those feminists from the start. I tried to join second wave feminism, and they wouldn't have me. They kept them because I would not badmouth men. Because you see, these women like Amelia Earhart and so on, they did not badmouth men. Okay, they admired men. They admired what men had done. Okay, and what they said was, we demand equal opportunity for women, which give us the opportunity to show that we can achieve at the same level as men, as who did all these great things. That was not the tone, okay, of second wave feminism from the start. It was always like, man, there's a patriarchy, blah, 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 like this and so on. Bunch of, these women were insane, okay, from the start.
And finally, on biological differences. Paglia maintains that the biological differences between the genders start with physical characteristics, but also involve deeper psychological divergences that influence behaviors, preferences, and capabilities. She points to evolutionary biology and endocrinology to explain how millennia of differentiated roles shaped distinct traits in men and women. For instance, men typically exhibit elevated levels of aggression and competitiveness, traits needed in their historical roles as hunters and warriors. Women, on the other hand, are generally more nurturing, a characteristic developed through roles that required caretaking and community building. Higher testosterone levels in men contribute to physical strength and aggressiveness, but also to behavioral patterns that supported their roles in protective and provisionary capacities. Conversely, women's higher estrogen levels enhance their empathetic abilities and foster strong interpersonal connections, traits that were indispensable for nurturing and maintaining cohesive social groups.
The authentic leftism is populist, okay? It is based in working class style, working class language, working class direct emotion, an openness and brusqueness of speech, okay? Not this fancy contorted jargon of the pseudo-leftists of academe, who are frauds. These people who managed to rise to the top at Berkeley, at Harvard, at Princeton, okay? The idea that these people are radical, they are career people, they're corporate types, okay, who succeeded in, and they love the institutional context. They know how to manipulate the bureaucracy, which has totally invaded and usurped, okay, the academe everywhere, okay? These people are company players. They could have done well in any field, okay? They love to sit in endless committees. They love bureaucratic regulation and so on. There's not one leftist, okay, in American academe raised his or her voice against the obscene growth of tuition costs, which have bankrupted a whole generation of young people. Not one voice, okay, to challenge that invasion by the bureaucrats, okay, absolute fascist bureaucrats, okay, who have added, they're cancerous, okay, there's so many of them. The faculty have completely lost any power in American academe, okay. It's a scandal what has happened, okay, and they deserve the present servitude that they're in right now, okay, because they never protested. Okay? Yes. My first job at Bennington College, 1976, I was there when there was an uprising by the faculty against encroachment by the Board of Trustees and the president, okay, and it was a huge thing. It was reported on the New York Times and so on, and we pushed that president out, okay, and there's not been a single uprising of that kind against encroachment by the trustees and by the administrations in all these decades, okay, passive slaves, they deserve their slavery.
Let us know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this exploration, please like, share, and subscribe for more thoughtful discussions.